Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Living in the 21st Century. I would like to introduce my special guests today. I have Dr. Tara Kafuri, who is an expert in neuropsychology and educator. And we have Mitch Lyons, who is the president and founder of Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
So, social emotional learning, what is it? Can you please introduce us a little bit to this topic and your organization, and what kind of action does your group take?
Well, the Social Emotional Learning Alliance was founded in 2011. We have approximately 2,000 members across the state. We also have a SEL for US, which is in 14 states. And we're mainly grassroots of teachers and school-based mental health people, college professors teaching new teachers. And social emotional learning is the educational process that teaches how to manage, first recognize and then manage emotions, as well as how to build long-lasting relationships with people, communication skills, what usually is referred to as people skills. Mm-hmm. And it builds what the business community calls emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm.
So this is a wonderful first step, the foundation for the mental health of our community. And we hear a lot more nowadays in the media and the social media, on TV, these terms, the mental health issues. And you deal, Dr. Tara Kafuri, you deal with already the next stage when the children already manifest a much more serious behavior, such as self-harm and suicidal thoughts and depression, anxiety. Can you tell us, in middle school children, is it already manifesting this kind of behavior? And has there been a change from, let's say, a decade ago? Do you see in your practice, did you notice some kind of evolution to this mental health issues, especially self-harm and depression, anxiety?
Statistically proven, there is a change in the last few years of increase of self-harm, increase of suicidal ideation, and negative seeking behaviors. I'd like to back up to Mitch's introduction of the Alliance, and I'd like to clarify that social emotional learning is needed in every single school. Yes. Before they come to see me, for example. I believe that if there is connectivity, if there is empathy that is taught, compassion, how to play on a team, how to coordinate with another classmate on a project, how to share roles in a classroom setting, for example, then I feel that would cause an innate and organic way of causing connectivity to the community, to themselves, mm-hmm. and the children won't feel isolated. When children don't feel a connection, when they don't feel loved, when they don't feel valued or appreciated, or if they're not taught those in school and at home, or in activities such as sports teams and activities such as after school exercises, I think that causes a child to feel not as connected, and it injures their self-esteem, their self-worth, their self-value, because they are seeing others that have these connectivity, they have these relationships, and they see, especially with online media, these beautiful pictures of beautiful people and their lives. And I think that all adds on and piles on to children, and that ends up without the skill sets for them to deal with emotions, without the training that the Alliance would be able to provide for the teachers and the students and the other community members and professors in colleges for educators. I think without that providing that information, children develop these skills that are negative, and that leads to injury, self-injury, that leads to thoughts of suicide, that does lead into some. Not all children are going to react in that way, and it's kind of like what we had spoken about before we went on air is exactly that. We have to make sure that we're not putting it to the extreme. Not all children are going to be in need of services, but you know, there is a growing trend of more and more children succumbing to anxiety, succumbing to frustration, and not having an outlet or a functioning skill set that will provide safe answers.
And your alliance goes not only to schools, but it wants to go into homes and businesses. And what are those exact set of tools that Dr. Kafuri was talking about that you guys address?
Well, first of all, just to clarify, the Alliance, Social Emotional Learning Alliance for Massachusetts, its mission is one of educational advocacy to promote social emotional learning wherever children meet. And we represent various providers who go into schools. We ourselves are advocates, work in the legislature, with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, with the Newton Public Schools, all communities, to ensure that there's progress made, because everything starts with the I. Yeah, I used to have a program called There's No I in Team, and it would drive coaches crazy. We're trying to teach teamwork here. Yes, but it starts with self. And role modeling of parents is so crucial to this learning at the earliest age possible.
So as a parent, what kind of specific things would you like me to learn?
It's a great question. One of the things is these very simple things, especially when the kids are young, and is to have them make a happy face or a sad face. Let's identify first, recognize and understand, then label and express and regulate emotion. And it all starts with recognize, like, how am I feeling? So lots of questions. How are you feeling today? I'll give you a good example. When my granddaughter at 3 was going to her first preschool age, and because my daughter had been doing these face games, pretend you're scared, pretend you're happy, you're sad, you're surprised, all of these different emotions that we have, she going towards the school, tugged at her hand and said, "I'm feeling shy right now." Ooh. So the response from my daughter was, well, it's normal to feel shy. And there's nothing wrong, and then encouraged her that maybe she would make a friend. And then after school, she said, "What happened? When you were shy, what happened?" And she said, "Oh, I made a friend." I said, "So next time you're shy, you'll make a friend." So in that, this is one obviously small example that should be repeated often, but it's a good example for parents on how to condition your child to recognize their emotion, because, as I'm sure Tara will tell you, is that the emotion rules everything. And there's a wonderful Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor who said, we perceive ourselves as thinking creatures who feel, but in biology, we're feeling creatures who think. And because the amygdala in brain science is the one that fires up immediately. The beginning of the show, there was anxiety here. We recognized it.
Yeah,
we made
we're calm.
We breathe.
We did breathing exercises to just let that go out. So these are things that can be taught at the earliest age possible. I'm a member of the Children's Mental Health Task Force, which is the Mass chapter of the American Pediatric Society. Fantastic organization. And they're well aware of SEL, and what we're trying to do is get out into the community, including to pediatricians' office, and say we should be talking about this to parents when they come in right away. These simple things, teaching empathy by asking, how do you think the character felt when that happened? Has that ever happened to you? That's teaching empathy, those simple things. They're very simple. And right on New TV, we have a series of 8 ads that run, PSAs about, you know, being positive is a skill. You have to practice it.
Yes.
And also building relationships is a skill. You have to practice it. So what we want to do is get out into the community in every possible way through religious organizations, through businesses, through the youth sports teams here, so that parents know what these skills are, and they can go on our website, selforma.org, and look up resources, and you'll see for families, and there's 3 wonderful links there put out by different organizations that talk about what you can do right at home.
Wonderful.
They're very definitive. So if you go on there, you actually see, well, how could I practice this with my child at home?
Thank you. So when we have a child that is starting to exhibit some more serious problems, issues, and Dr. Kafuri, you said that middle school-aged children already exhibit some of these more serious behaviors like self-harm and anxiety, depression, isolation, and desire to remain hidden. Middle school children already learn how to conceal those behaviors from parents, from peers, from teachers. Is there something that parents should be aware of when they see a child is a little bit more anxious, or parents probably will just say, oh, it's a puberty, it's a difficult age, and he will grow out of it. Are there certain triggers or certain things that parents should pay attention to, and also the teachers, do they actually pay attention to those things so that we can all work together to prevent the further escalation of a mental health issue?
That's a very loaded question. Let's unpack it a little bit. So the very first few things are the signs that you want to address. You also have to be willing to look for those signs and not just say, well, they are in the adolescent stage, so they're starting to develop into teenagers, and that must just be teenage behaviors. It's like the old saying that we're trying to do away with, that boys will be boys. You know, same thing. Teens will not just be teens. Teens act out in different ways. Some teens act with silly behaviors, and then some are concerning red flags, what we like to call red flags. And some of that could be wearing longer clothes, not wanting to roll up their sleeves if they are self-harm, or not wearing clothing that is appropriate for the weather. That's the very first thing. Isolating yourselves into your rooms for a good long amount of time. Losing interest in sports, losing interest in friends, losing interest in going out. They find excuses for them not to join their friends. And then you find that they're staying home a little bit more. Their sleeping habits are definitely a must. If they're up a lot later at night than they're used to, and and then they don't they don't sleep in the morning, then that is a concern. That's little bit of sleep. It's a lot of a concern. So we want to make sure that you watch for that. If they end up on the opposite side, sleeping a lot, that is also a very large red flag. We also want to look for signs of altered sentences that are concerning, that put themselves down. They don't feel good enough. And they come out and say it in a, well, that's just not me, or well, that I'm just not good at that. Those are concerning that will start to appear, or having the communication and having questions like, how are you feeling today, and what was at school, and they don't really always want to answer the questions, or they answer very curtly and then go on their way. That might be a teenager, yes, but you also want to investigate to make sure that that's not just a teenager, that there's might be behavior behind that. So those are signs, and teachers can ask the same thing. Teachers do hear from students, and they are there. They are the eyes and ears in a classroom, so they do notice certain behaviors. They do notice the clothing. They do notice the withdrawal or the grades descending. So those are signs that you really want to take a look into and be wary of that. And there's many more on River Educational Consulting's webpage, which again is rivereducational.consulting. It has many different resources that you'd be able to find further signs and concerning how to approach a child, and if you have a fear of them are hurting themselves or having a lack of self-esteem.
Is there something that parents should not do in terms of should not ask specific questions when they are aware that something's going on? Like, what is the fine line between actually going into their privacy and at the same time being a parent? So
right. Well, the very first thing you want to always have is an approachable, a concern, a concern approach, not a punitive approach. It's not something that children can control. We have to understand that it is something that when Mitch just talked about positivity, teaching positivity, unfortunately this generation, the generation that is now the teenagers, they are called the depressive generation, and that is a thought among many societies that is what they want to be. They want to be depressed. They want to not seek positivity. That's not all the children. That is just some of the children that I see in my field. So what you wanted to be able to do is have a non-judgmental conversation with your children. You want to ask those questions that you may be afraid to ask. You might want to ask them straight out. Are they self-harming? Do they have a lack of self-esteem? What is going on with their emotional standpoint? And maybe going over to the website that Mitch had said, SEL SEL Alliance for Mass, would be a good alternative to get to the questions that would be necessary to approach.
Right. I'm hesitant because if there's self-harm involved, it would be you need professional help, and we're an educational advocacy group.
Well,
so,
they're looking for specific questions.
But in terms of preparing, so you're much more aware of the emotional state of your child.
Right, exactly.
That could start at a very early age. Like if somebody is watching the show and has a child at 2 years old, it's not too early to start these discussions about how people feel, that about their emotions, and that each one is legitimate. Like non-judgmental, as you were saying.
Exactly. And I think there is a commercial that already exists about having dinner with your family each and every night, and it gives you the statistics written on like a growth chart. And I think the question is right. If we connect with our family the entire way, if we connect with our children that way, these questions will just be innate and they will be able to be answered very fully. And I do think then at that point, you're right, if it is a concern of self-harm, that is something that you would address with somebody like myself. But if you have started earlier and asked the positive questions, or if you have nowhere to start, maybe the positivity questions or the getting to the emotion questions might be a source before the difficult, straightforward questions.
One of the, there are many skills involved in social emotional learning, but one of them is ask for help.
Right.
Like there's no, promoting that if you feel something is wrong, is ask for help. And I think that touches on, student voice. That the more we give students opportunities to become critical thinkers and problem solvers and decision makers, and facilitate conversations instead of telling kids what to do, then the healthier it is for them. And if they feel they have voice, they're going to be able to express themselves. Like a lot of the horrible abuse that happens is that this is like a 16th century saying, children shall be seen but not heard, except they had seen it. Anyway, point is that has been the way that we have approached children for so long, and that's why they don't speak up. And for terrorism, we say if we see something, say something, but we don't tell our children to do that. And if we did, a lot of things would change, because children have, and as I know everyone here knows, an innate wisdom that uncluttered by an entire life of, so we don't listen enough. And as social emotional learning is absolutely pro student-centric learning.
Right.
For instance, in athletics, coaches should not be telling kids. They should be asking kids, facilitating conversations so they can actually have a voice on what their team is. Let them create the team and not
ownership
give
of that.
Right.
Right. If it provides an ownership, children, you're 100% correct. If we need to stop talking at our children, we need to start listening to our children, and at the same time create ownership and allow them to problem solve, allow them to have these difficult
And fail.
situations.
And,
And
will,
fail.
and it will
100%.
prompt the children to actually confide in you,
Right.
because usually these behaviors are concealed. And so what can the school specifically do to create this trust between the student and the teacher?
Well, as a former educator, I think instead of just seeing your children as a roster, which is hard, if you, especially if you teach multiple levels, you know, you might have 100 kids, you have to try to find something to connect
Individual.
with the child. You have to find something that even remotely is saying, you know, James, you look great in those new sneakers today. I really like them. That allows that child to say, hey, she noticed me. She's invested in me. And teaching them exactly problem solving. Okay, we have a situation here. What should we do? And that allows them to develop confidence. If you have confidence, you're more likely to succeed than to think about harming yourself. And that's confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. Teachers can teach them through building SEL into every single curriculum matter, building it into math, building it into science, building it into even you know, the gym class in and of itself, building it into community meetings, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. If we can just teach our children these values of self-worth, self-love, positive talk, and, you know, being willing to connect with another person. We hit it off when we just met each other talking about basketball. We had a great situation. My daughter Ava who's 9, can go into a group, and she's very confident because we have the positive self-talk. She's confident that she can make a friend without having any of her friends in summer camp week. So I think if we are giving them the foundation, if we are giving them the thoughts and building on it in schools. Educators are not solely responsible for teaching all of this self-worth and self-confidence, but they are responsible for also being a part of the team that builds. But the individual, the child, needs to have that ownership and needs to develop the critical thinking.
So I need to bring up a question that a lot of Newton parents are asking and that we discussed before, and it's the recess and outdoor recess or recess that children have downtime for their brains to kind of recharge, reload. So I spoke with the office of the superintendent of Newton Public Schools, and it's confirmed that middle schools in Newton do not have outdoor recess. But there is, of course, initiative going on to introduce elements of movement and walking outside. I would love to give an example of Finland as one of the happiest nations, and they have very little mental health issues. And in schools, the children have breaks after every single 45-minute session of structured learning. As a neuropsychologist and as a person who has immense experience with children playing outside, outdoors, playing basketball, how important is this issue from the psychological and social emotional learning point of view? So Dr. Kafuri, start with you. We have just a few minutes left. So.
Well, I think any kind of athletic or any kind of activity builds on their neurological, their behavioral, their social, their emotional behavior, and it helps problem solving. It does help with them being able to make friends and to resolve conflicts that they might arise on a playground. And I do think that in the United States as a whole, there is a lack of activity during the school day.
Do you think children need some downtime? For example, 45 minutes of very vigorous structured learning, and giving them and teachers a break for 10-15 minutes. How would that benefit a brain?
Well, I think it goes without saying that any kind of outdoor activity in and of itself is highly functional and highly productive. I think, at this point in time, it has to do with a much greater issue, concern, whether it's statewide or whether it's federally wide, of what we're mandating as far as on-time learning. And with testing, I mean, standardized testing, it brings extreme stress. So I think with all of that, maybe we flip the switch and we consider more on how to raise well-developed individuals. So maybe play is a part of that, but I think we need to focus more on building healthy individuals than we do on having high standardized testing.
I agree with that.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn from play, a tremendous amount, and because we've never really, except in physical education, where that's an instructive part of the day. So I'm wondering whether or not that actually is part of the middle school, this physical education, because they have an SEL, social emotional learning curriculum. Many studies have shown the importance of play, and it's a constant opposing force where, as it's been during the whole test for content period, of which we're thankfully out of, which was rigorous academics, until science has shown that actually, if they can learn how to get over the traumas they suffer every day, as we all do, not just kids, everyone,
of course,
is having traumas every day. If they learn that academics actually is improved by 11 and 17% for at-risk kids, by having learning how to overcome obstacles and emotional problems. And of course, the earlier we start, the better. Parents and teachers should be adding to what parents are doing. And instead, it's going to sort of doing the other way around.
So
Right,
as
exactly.
we wrap up, final words, how can parents and community connect with your organization if there is a need, and also with your organization?
I can be emailed at rivereducationalconsulting@gmail.com, or you can go online at rivereducationalconsulting.
Consulting.
You can go on our website, SEL, and then the number 4, SEL for MA, .org. And there's lots of opportunity to get involved, especially here in Newton, where we're setting up a volunteer committee to bring SEL out into the community. And thanks for the opportunity.
So much. Thank you so much. I'm very happy that we were able to talk about this. And if you have further questions, definitely take advantage of this wonderful opportunity and contact these people. Thank you.